In this video, I'm going to explain why testing creatives on small budgets or in separate ABO campaigns is bad practice, and of course, I'm going to share with you what you should do instead. Now, I see many Facebook ads tutorials on YouTube where people will teach you to test creatives or even audiences by setting up multiple low-budget ad sets and trying to find winners. And these ad sets will have $5 or $10 budgets on them. And then what they do is they suggest you do one of two things. You either take the winning ads and move them into a much higher budget scaling campaign, so your tests feed into the scaling campaign, or they will tell you to either duplicate or scale up the winning test to get more budget out of it, scaling it up, okay, the test itself. And many of you probably do this and get success with it, I'm sure even. But there's a few patterns you might see arise that actually makes this not the most efficient way of testing creatives. In the first example, where you're moving the winner into the high budget scaling campaign, what you'll often find is that ad just won't spend any money once it's in the scaled up budget campaign. And all the other ads that are already in that campaign will steal all the budget, and they will continue to spend how they're spending, and nothing will be assigned to that new ad. Or what you might see, if it does spend, the performance won't be as good as the performance it was getting when it was in that low test ad set. And in fact, that low test ad set may still be running if you've left it on and still be beating the one in the main campaign. In the second scenario, where we're scaling up the test, you have one of two things you can do. You can either scale it horizontally by duplicating, or you can scale it vertically by increasing the budget. So if we look at the one where we're just scaling vertically by increasing the budget, what you'll often see is the ad will perform poorer as the budget increases over time, and then it will eventually just die out completely, and you'll have to turn off that test ad set or duplicate it. In the duplicated ad set with the higher budget, so if you take the test and then you just duplicate it with a higher budget, it's almost like a 50-50 chance of the ad performing very well or the ad just completely tanking in performance as soon as you start it, okay? And then you maybe duplicate it again or whatever. Now, of course, this isn't always the case. You can definitely get success doing it this way and even scale accounts to a very large spend. But what you have to keep in mind is that performance is based entirely on luck as opposed to a methodological way of testing your creatives based on how Facebook's tech is actually designed. And what that means is you're going to always be less efficient, wasting more time, wasting more money than someone who is approaching it with a more methodical way of testing their creatives. But before I show you what approach you should take, let's just quickly cover why the aforementioned strategies don't work for creative testing. So there's one very, very important thing that you have to keep in mind and you have to know. Ads perform differently depending on the scale you are at in an account. You'll see this in every single account. What got you from A to B in your journey of growing your business on Facebook ads isn't going to get you from B to C. Because what happens on your low spend, low budget ad sets, or even if the whole account in general is on low spend, is you're targeting a very, very warm, highly engaged, highly relevant audience who don't need much persuasion to buy your product or don't need much persuasion to buy your brand, because they either already know the product you're offering, they're already aware of it, or they're already aware of your brand. When you want to scale up on Facebook, either at an individual campaign level, ad set level, or account overall, what you're doing is you're telling Facebook, right, I now want to branch out and get more people who aren't as warm, the traffic's not as warm, so they're not as educated as to the product, they're not as aware of the product, not as aware of your business, and bring them into your funnel. But that means they need more education or encouragement to buy from you because they're not as engaged as the other people, the warm audience, okay? So you're always going to see that whenever you scale up, they'll reach a point in time where you have used that whole pool of very highly engaged people, and Facebook needs to go out and start bringing more people and warming them up. So often an ad that works for the previous warm audience won't work for the new colder audience. both in terms of how customers actually respond to it, so customer value, and Facebook's predetermined assessment of how that ad is going to perform, estimated action rate. Both of these things relate back to Facebook's equation for how it determines whether your ad is valuable or not. Okay, so this is the equation Facebook uses for every single auction that your ad goes into. You have your bid times your estimated action rate. So before you even run it, Facebook's going to determine, is this ad good enough for the people I'm going to show it to, based on all the previous data we have on how people respond, plus user value, how people actually respond to that ad, your landing page, your customer support, everything embodied together. Okay, so what is working for the cold traffic might not work. So what's working for the warm traffic might not work for the cold traffic. Now, obviously, this is happening on a micro level, but I want to walk you through an example that makes it quite clear and understandable. Okay, so let's think of me selling the product of fertilizer. So when I have a low budget campaign and I'm going after that warm audience, they know that to make a plant grow, you need to have water, sunlight, and fertilizer. Okay, they're very aware of the problem. They're very, very aware of the solution. The solution is fertilizer. So if I am a fertilizer brand and I show an ad with an offer of discount on my fertilizer, that highly warm audience, they don't need convincing, they don't need education. They're just going to buy it straight away because they know that is the solution to the problem. He's got a good offer, let me buy it. Versus once I've scaled up the campaign and Facebook now needs to go out and bring some more cold audiences into my funnel, well, that cold audience, they know that you need light and they know that you need water for a plant because everyone knows that. But not everyone knows that you need to also add fertilizer because at some point in time, the nutrients in your pot in your soil are going to be drained by the plant, okay? So if I then present them this same ad just offering the offer, it might go over their head and they might not see, well, why is this relevant to me? Why do I need this? But if I have an ad explaining the solution to their problem, if I have an ad that calls out, does your plant look like this? You need fertilizer, you know? If I educate them on that, they then go, oh, this is the solution to my problem. And I might not even need to give them an offer. I might have just been the brand that educated them on it. They have the problem, they need to solve the problem. This is the solution right there and then in front of them. They might just buy that from me, okay? Rather than searching around. So that's the difference. When you have an ad for that warm audience, it might not translate into the cold audience. Sure, it might do if you have a long form video, maybe it covers everything. But quite often you're not going to have that, and that's why you see the difference. So obviously this is happening on, like I said, a micro level. This is super high level, easy to understand concept, but in everyday practice, it's going to be way more nuanced than that, and that's why things might seem similar but actually act a bit differently. The second problem with a lot of these is you're sending the ad back into the learning phase. So it could be shown to a completely different audience segment from where it was originally tested. Now, so for example, if you duplicate the ad set and just hike up the budget, well, that's completely started the learning phase of the ad set again, and that is no longer being shown to the same people. So you might get lucky and your ad just hits the right audience segment, starts working, but you also might get unlucky and it just completely dives. Now, sure, over time, if you just left that running, it probably would optimize and find the right people. But most people don't do that. They'll just duplicate the ad set again and hope they land on gold this time. But like I said before, that is leaving this up to luck. You're leaving it to chance. And when you do that, it is inefficient. You've wasted time, you've wasted money going through this process when you could have just done a better method of testing creative and not had that issue. You've not wasted money trying to see if I hit gold on the first time, okay? And then that's the same problem that happens with testing in ABO campaigns, because anytime you want to move it to the scaling one, you're always going to be taking it from the ABO, the ad set where the learning is, and moving it somewhere else, and it has to go and learn again. You don't retain that learning at the ad set level as you would if you were doing stuff inside a CBO campaign. So if we just look at my original example again and look at all these, we can go through it. So the scaling campaign, when you move it into a large budget scaling campaign from the test campaign, what you see is the ad won't spend. Well, that relates back to the value equation I showed you earlier, where Facebook determines that this ad has a low estimated action rate. From all Facebook's data, they decide this is not going to work. Let's not give it any budget. We know it's not going to work. If ads are performing poorer, the second one, it's because they're not relevant enough to the cold audience. So we've moved it from the low budget test campaign into that large budget scaling campaign, much wider audience. There's cold, there's warm, there's super hot, it's very varied. That ad, sure, it maybe is still ticking along in the low budget test ad set that you've left on, but it's not relevant enough for that wider audience, and it's performing poorer than it is in that small, constrained budget test campaign, okay? And then testing up, scaling. So you can either scale horizontally or you can scale vertically. This one is scaling vertically, where we're just going to scale up our original test ad set. And what you see ad performance is poorer as budget increases and the ad eventually dies. Well, again, that relates back to not being relevant to that new audience, the cold audience. As you scale up the budget, Facebook goes out further and tries to find more people. So that's why that happens. And then finally, if you just duplicate the ad set that was performing, hike up the budget, what you're starting to experience is that whole ad set learning, the ad set learning phase starting again, okay? So the ad set sometimes performs well, the ad sometimes performs well, and the ad sometimes doesn't perform well. You're leaving it to chance. And of course, you will have some effect as well from it not being relevant to the cold audience. Which brings me on to the solution. Test all of your creatives in the CBO campaign that they will eventually be running in, should they prove themselves to be winners. Because that will prevent the ad set having to re-enter the learning phase and finds winning creatives for the actual scale they will be running on, without wasting large sums of money trying to test that. So I have a video where I show you how to set these up and how to run them, which you can go and watch. But what I want to do just quickly is jump into Ads Manager and show you some of the common complaints people would have with this method and explain why they work. Because these all stem from people not having faith in Facebook. And what they think happens is they run the ads in this method and they don't spend because of what I told you about before, the estimated action rate. And they go, well, this is not an accurate test because I haven't spent any money, but really it was never going to work. So I can show you a perfect example of this in an account now. So if we look at these campaigns here, now you can see this is my winners campaign with the individual ads in it. And then these three are creative tests that I started running on the 17th of November. So this is the week before the 17th of November that I'm showing you. And you can see in this week, 38K has gone to this winner's ad set, okay? All the spend is going there. Now, when I launch the tests, this is the week after, we can see something interesting happening. So if you look at these bottom two, they have reasonable spend, but it's not very much compared to the total spend, right? One of them has cost per lead. This is not ecom, this is a lead gen, but it explains the principle. So one of them has a cost per lead that's $21, which is lower than the average, and that's much lower than our KPI. That is great, but that ad set, those ads within it that we're testing, they can only handle a low amount of spend. They're probably only relating to a small segment of the audience, people who are really warm. So sure, they are performing, they have place in the campaign. I will move them into the winners ad set, but they're not able to carry a large amount of spend. They're not able to be scaled. So they have their purpose, but they're not scalable. Versus this one here, where you can see that Facebook has obviously deemed this to work, and then as it has been delivered, the customer value has been great, And it's gone and taken half the spend, 50% of the spend has been pulled out of this winners ad set and gone to this creative test. So I could have tested this in a small $5 a day creative test ad set somewhere else. And sure, maybe it performs and I move it into this campaign. But rather than go through that process of waiting to see that happen, and actually all three of the ads within this test worked, rather than going through that process of testing them, all that time, all that money spent doing that, I just stick it into here. If it's not going to work, it doesn't spend. And if it works unbelievably well, if it beats what we're currently doing, it is going to pull the spend. You know, if you are genuinely doing something that is better than what you currently have, Facebook is going to give it the spend. It is going to pull it through and you're going to get good results. So you can see the conversion rate has improved and the cost per lead is lower than what this winners campaign is doing. So it's in fact better than anything we have in this winners campaign. So I've obviously taken the creatives from that and moved them into the winners campaign. So that is really it. If something is not spending, it's because it's never going to work. You can try this yourselves. Because I have clients, what a lot of time I will do is I will add a minimum spend budget to these, so I can just report to them, listen, we have tested this creative test. Here's the money behind it. It didn't work, but at least I am still testing it in the CBO campaign to the actual audience that it's going to be running in if it is a winner. If I'm doing it from my own brands, I don't do that. I trust in Facebook. I don't need to add the minimum spend. I know if it doesn't work, if it doesn't spend, it doesn't work, it was never going to work. I could test it in a small budget campaign. Sure, I get some results. Sure, I do well. But I know at the end of the day, if I ever want to scale, that ad is not going to be the ad that takes me there. Okay, so I hope this is beneficial. If you want to learn more about this process, like I said earlier, go and watch that video where I do the full tutorial on how to run ads, how I use this strategy. And yeah, if you've watched that before, thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you in another video very soon.